Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiv Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtapraishu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhakti Nashtiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Srila Goswami, Volume 4, in every town and village around the world, 1968 to 1971, Chapter 29, Unlimited Opportunity, Limited Time. So Prabhupada disciples had arranged a program in London, and Prabhupada sent a recording of the lecture over there. So they played the recording, they played the tape. When Prabhupada is saying, but to assemble and sit together, we require a place for congregation. Therefore, a temple of the Krishna consciousness movement is required to be established in various centers in the world, irrespective of the particular country's culture, philosophy, and religion. The Krishna consciousness is so universal and perfect that it can appeal to everyone, irrespective of his position. Therefore, I fervently appeal to you, all present in this meeting, to extend your cooperation for successful execution of this great movement. Thank you once more. There was a pause, and then Prabhupada began playing the harmonium and singing Hare Krishna. Afterward, he spoke again. My disciples in London have very eagerly asked me to visit there, and I am also very anxious to see you all. So as soon as there is opportunity, I shall go with my Sankirtan party, who are now engaged in Los Angeles, and that will be a great pleasure for you all to meet together. That's all. Only a few weeks after this meeting, the group received their first important publicity. A photo of the 6 devotees and little Saraswati appeared with an article by the famous columnist Atticus in the Sunday Times. Guru Das was quoted as saying, Hare Krishna is a chant which sets God dancing on your tongue. Try chanting Queen Elizabeth and see the difference. The article described the missionary group from America as very gentle people, a bit unworldly, but not at all ingenuous. Citing their renunciation of illicit sex and intoxication, the article commented, Tame, you might think, but they look very well on it, and what's likely to earn them in public is their chanting. Within a few days, the same article appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle, but with a new headline, Krishna chants startle London. Prabhupada was pleased when he saw the headline. Indeed, his disciples had succeeded where his sannyasi godbrothers had failed. Although several of Prabhupada's scholarly godbrothers had lectured around England over the last 35 years, only one person, an elderly English lady named Elizabeth Bowtell, had shown some interest. Yamuna had written Prabhupada to find out if they should visit Mrs. Bowtell. She had received the name Vinod Dasi, and Prabhupada had replied, the history of this Dasi is that she's an old lady and has a house and has hung a sign, Gaudiya Math, but that's all. If they liked, Prabhupada had said, they could pay her a courtesy call and see if she would let them use her place for kirtans. One of the men had gone to see her at her home, several hours out of the city, but from behind her closed door, she had refused to meet with them unless he brought an introductory letter from the Gaudiya Math in New Delhi. Vinod Dasi was a fruit of 35 years of sannyasis preaching in England, whereas in 4 months, Prabhupada's young American missionaries were startling London. After months of living scattered throughout the city, the devotees met a landlord who allowed them to stay together rent-free in a vacant warehouse at Covent Garden. The devotees improvised a temporary temple and soon recruited the first 3 British devotees. The newcomers at once took to the full Krishna-conscious regime, including the dhoti and shaved head, and loved it. The devotees, thrilled to see the group expanding and Prabhupada's potency working, decided to phone Prabhupada from the landlord's office. The telephone was a conference phone, and Prabhupada's voice came over the little loudspeaker on the desk. The devotees sat around the desk, listening tensely. Prabhupada, Mukunda said, we have some new brahmacharis here. Oh, are they cooking chapatis? Prabhupada asked from across the ocean. The devotees laughed uncontrollably, then hushed to hear more. No, said Mukunda, but they will be now. The devotees each told Prabhupada how they missed him, and he said he missed them too and would come as soon as they could get a place. After allowing the devotees 3 months in the warehouse at Covent Garden, the landlord announced that he needed to use the space and the devotees would have to move. The couples moved to 3 separate locations, and again the strong group spirit dissipated. Prabhupada began sending 2 or 3 letters a week to the scattered couples, praising them for their sincere determination. The devotees would gather regularly, if only to show one another their latest letters. Prabhupada wrote to Mukunda of his desire to preach Krishna consciousness in the West, specifically London. So far as I am concerned, I always wish only to expedite my mission of life to spread Krishna consciousness in the western part of the world. I'm still firmly convinced that if I can establish this movement through the help of all the boys and girls who have now joined with me, then it will be a great achievement. I'm an old man and there has already been warning. But before I leave this body, I wish to see some of you very strong in Krishna conscious understanding. I'm very glad and proud also that you 6 boys and girls, although you have not been able to establish a nice center in London, still you have done your best. And the news has reached far away in India that my disciples are doing very nice work in Krishna consciousness. So that is my pride. I have received a letter from my godbrother informing me that it has been advertised in India that in Vietnam also somebody is spreading Hare Krishna movement. So there is no need to be disappointed. You go on with your work as best as Krishna gives you the opportunity, and there is no cause of your anxiety. Everything is going smoothly, but since you are now separated, the strength of your activities appears to be a little disturbed. Now you try to assemble together in the same spirit as you were doing, and in that case, temple or no temple, your movement will go on progressing. We are not much concerned about the temple because temple worship is not primary factor in this age. Primary factor is Sankirtan. But sometimes we want a center where people may gather and see, so a temple is required secondarily. So try your best immediately to live together. I'm very much eager to see that you're again living together. For Srila Prabhupada's disciples, his instruction that they preach in London was much more binding than any other obligation. He was in their hearts and they thought of him constantly. In carrying out his orders and trying to please him, they were constrained not by force or law, but by love. To please a spiritual master is to please the Supreme Personality of God. And for Prabhupada's sincere disciples, to please him seemed the end in itself. See how much they just loved him. That's amazing. And they did just out of love for him. Los Angeles, June 23rd, 1969. After leaving New Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada visited his center in Los Angeles, where he installed deities of Radha and Krishna. Although he had told his disciples in London the primary factor was Sankirtan, deity worship was also necessary. In his writings, Prabhupada had discussed the need for deity worship, and he had gradually introduced higher and higher standards of deity worship in each of his ISKCON centers. Los Angeles, having become the model ISKCON center, was a natural place for him to introduce a more opulent and demanding standard of worship for Radha and Krishna. While more than 100 devotees and guests sat in the spacious hall, Prabhupada bathed and dressed the little forms of Radha and Krishna, then placed them on the altar. He was inviting Radha and Krishna to descend, to give his disciples the opportunity to serve them. He was offering his disciples Radha and Krishna with faith that his disciples would not neglect them. If the devotees somehow lost their enthusiasm, Prabhupada explained in his lecture, then the worship would become like idol worship. So there is a difference between Murti Puja and Vigraha Seva. Idol worship is Murti Puja. If it is done without enthusiasm, without devotion, then it is just idol worship. But we worship the deities. Deities are non-different from the Lord himself. Understanding that and then worshipping accordingly with devotion, then it becomes deity worship or serving the deities. So there's a big difference. I mean, same, if you want to go by the word murti, it could be same murti, but depending upon the worship of the pujari and his consciousness, it could be idol worship or it could be deity worship. And deity worship means bhakti, complete. If there is no life, then it is idol worship. Where there is life feeling, then you think, where is Krishna? Here is Krishna. Oh, I have to serve him. I have to dress him. I have to serve Radharani. She is there. Oh, I just have to do it very nicely and as far as possible, decorate her to the best capacity. If you think like this, then you are Krishna conscious. But if you think that it's a brass-made doll or idol, then Krishna will reciprocate with you accordingly. If you think that this is a brass-made idol, then it will remain a brass-made idol to you forever. But if you elevate yourself to a higher platform of Krishna consciousness, then Krishna, this very Krishna, will talk with you. This Krishna will talk with you. See, this is Prabhupada's consciousness. With each visit to each center, Prabhupada gave the devotees more service, deepening their commitment to Krishna. All the various services were actually the spiritual master's responsibility. He said, and when a disciple cleaned the temple or performed any service, he did so as a spiritual master's assistant. And any job done improperly was a spiritual master's anxiety. If the devotees whimsically changed the deity worship or neglected the temple, then Prabhupada, more than any disciple, would feel distress. Such a strong connection Prabhupada had with the deities. Whenever Prabhupada saw a disciple eager to take on more of the anxiety of reaching Krishna consciousness, he would assign that devotee greater responsibility. Anxiety for serving Krishna, Prabhupada said, was the greatest satisfaction. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur had stated, the trouble I encounter in my devotion service, I will consider the greatest happiness. This is the mood of devotees. In their service, they want to do more and more. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur like that. The trouble I encounter in your devotional service, I'll consider the greatest happiness. This is actually where non-devotees, they cannot understand the mood of devotees. What are you talking about? Why go through so much of trouble? And trouble, it could be trouble in preaching, trouble in raising money for the temple service, for the service of the deities, or just doing some austerity. Like for people, it is very much austerity that you get up so early in the morning and take bath and do Mangala Aarti and then sit down, chant. Why chant the same name over and over? Well, first of all, it's not trouble. They think it is trouble. But it just gives pleasure to the devotee also. And this part, non-devotee just cannot understand. Satisfaction for the devotee, Prabhupada explained, lay in pleasing the previous spiritual masters, and that was best accomplished by preaching to the fallen souls. To the degree that the devotees carried out that order, they would satisfy the spiritual master and subsequently feel satisfaction themselves. Prabhupada gave the example of Krishna and the gopis. When the gopis pleased Krishna in the Ras dance, Krishna smiled. And when the gopis saw Krishna smile, their happiness and beauty increased 1,000,000 times. When Krishna saw the newly increased beauty of the gopis, he became more pleased. And thus the happiness and beauty of the gopis increased even more. This loving competition increased on and on, unlimitedly. So this is the relationship of Krishna and the gopis. Gopis become more beautiful seeing Krishna being happy, and Krishna, when he sees their beauty increasing, his happiness increases. Just there's a competition. And this is spiritual world. This is the real happiness that we all are looking for. But then come all these Vedakarvadis. Oh no, ultimate has no form, no activities, nothing. It's void. It's just light. So this is where they miss out the beauty, the happiness of spiritual world, of being in relationship with Krishna, being a servant of Krishna. So how can they even find happiness, the real happiness? Even in dealings between spiritual master and disciple, a sense of loving competition prevailed, each wanting to serve the other, neither seeking service for himself. Prabhupada was increasing the duties and responsibilities in each of his ISKCON centers, and sincere disciples were coming forward to accept those responsibilities. Thus, everyone was feeling satisfaction. This was pure devotion service, to be free from all material desires and to serve Krishna as directed by the spiritual master and the scriptures. When Prabhupada said this, his disciples would become happy by serving Krishna, he spoke from his own deep realization of that ecstasy. Whenever he installed a deity in one of the temples, his ecstasy was greater than that of any of his disciples. At the Rath Yatra festivals in Golden Gate Park or any public preaching function, he was the most enlivened. He, more than any of his disciples, wanted the public to come and chant and dance in the temple and see the deity of Krishna. And when they did, he was the most pleased. And if a disciple fell away, Prabhupada was the most displeased. So this also happened. It's not like everybody came and just stayed. We all have our own sanskaras to deal with. Everybody's sanskar is different. And everybody's way of dealing with them is also different. So sanskar means the strong desire in our consciousness to do something, whether it is uh, to maybe to drink alcohol or to gamble or to eat meat or to do some good service or just be humble, be nice. These are all sanskars that we get from previous lives. It could be just previous life or could be some other lives. So sanskaras are deep impressions in our consciousness. So based on that, yes, even if we take up devotion service, but if the sanskar is very strong of say drinking, then the person takes up drinking again. It depends. If we have created a sanskar deep enough in this lifetime for devotion service, previous lifetime sanskar is there, but this sanskar, if this is stronger, and intelligence, by intelligence, we stop our mind to go to other things. Then only we make progress and we stay in devotional service. Otherwise, it's difficult. It's not that easy. Nor was Prabhupada aloof from the details of temple management, the cost of things, how the devotees were being received in public, how each disciple was advancing. Although his disciples saw him as the most exalted Vaishnava and intimate associate of Lord Krishna, they knew he was always available to guide them in their services. He was their leader, but he was with them. He was far above them, but he remained close to them. Only rarely did he leave them behind, as at the Los Angeles deity installation, when he began to cry, speaking directly to Krishna. Krishna, I am most rotten and fallen, but I have brought this thing for you. Please take it. Except for such rare moments, Prabhupada's disciples saw him preaching and serving along with them. Prabhupada is praying to Krishna, I am most rotten and fallen. If Prabhupada is saying like this, what is our position? We don't even exist actually. San Francisco, July 25th, 1969. The day before the Rath Yatra festival, Prabhupada arrived at the San Francisco airport, where a crowd of 50 chanting devotees greeted him. Reporters stepped forward with what to them was an important, relevant question. Swamiji, what is your opinion on the recent manned US moon landing? So moon landing was a big deal in America at that time, and they wanted to ask Prabhupada's opinion on that. Prabhupada said, shall I flatter you or tell the truth? Prabhupada asked. The truth, they said. It's a waste of time because it does not benefit you if you cannot live there. The time could have been better spent in Krishna consciousness. We must go beyond this universe to the spiritual sky, which is eternal, beyond birth, death, old age, and disease. The San Francisco Chronicle printed a picture and story, Ecstasy in Concourse B. On the day of the Rath Yatra parade, 100 devotees and a crowd of 1,000 gathered on Hyde Street before the tall cart. The deities of Jagannath, Subhadra, and Balram from the elevated platform within the cart smiled down upon the crowd. A group of devotee musicians seated themselves within the cart, made last-minute checks of the loudspeaker system, and began kirtan. In the center of the cart, just beneath the deity platform, a red upholstered Vyasasana awaited Prabhupada's arrival. As Prabhupada's car approached, he could hear the cries of the devotees, and as he stepped from the car, he saw them all bow down in obeisances. Folding his hands and smiling, he acknowledged his enthusiastic disciples, and he looked around with pleasure at the large crowd that had already gathered. Turning towards the cart, he beheld the deities on their throne, the same deities who had inaugurated Rath Yatra in America 2 years before. They were beautifully dressed and garlanded, and multicolored pennants and thick garlands of carnations decorated their cart. Rath Yatra was becoming more wonderful each year. Prabhupada bowed down before Jagannath, Subhadra, and Balram, and his disciples all bowed with him. As Prabhupada took his seat on the cart, the kirtan again began, and the cart, pulled with 2 long ropes by dozens of men and women, slowly began to move forward. Buckets of burning frankincense poured aromatic clouds from the deity's platform above Prabhupada's head as slowly the cart moved along the road to the park. How many people are behind us? Prabhupada asked, turning to Tamal Krishna, who rode beside him on the cart and had been leading the kirtan. Tamal Krishna climbed back and surveyed the crowd as far as he could see. 5,000. Sing Jai Jagannath, Prabhupada said. And Tamal Krishna then changed the chant from Hare Krishna to Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath. Throughout the parade, Prabhupada sat serenely watching, his right hand in his bead bag. The large crowd consisted mostly of young hippies, but also included businessmen dressed in white and dressed in suits and ties, elderly persons with their grandchildren and families, and a few stray dogs, a mixed Sunday crowd. Suddenly, devotees in front began shouting, "Stop the cart, stop the cart." Ahead, the low arch of a park bridge spanned the roadway. The devotees managed to stop the 35 feet high cart just before it reached the bridge. Although the parade appeared to have reached an unforeseen impasse, the chanting continued unabated. The previous year, the procession had taken this time the same route with a smaller cart, and even then Shyamsundar had had to climb up and saw off the spire. This year, however, Narayan had devised a collapsible dome with a crank to lower the canopy and superstructure. When Prabhupada had heard of these plans, he had asked, "Are you sure you want to depend on mechanical means? It could be a disaster." Now the time to lower the canopy had come and the crank would not work. So sometimes things happen, and actually whatever Jagannath you want, that's what happens. So anyway, we'll continue with this wonderful Rath Yatra discussion tomorrow. So see anybody has any questions or comments.
Nice class, Guruji. Jai Jagannath.
Thank you, Mata. Jai Jagannath.
Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhuji.